My frustration surged uncontrollably as disbelief washed over me. This chaos, all because I invited my friends to celebrate my birthday? It felt like the air around me was thinning, and my anger churned within me, threatening to explode. I began shouting, pacing furiously across the apartment. "Hi, I'm Grace. Let me rewind 6 months to when I first moved in with Jim." This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. We'd been dating for quite a while, and moving in together seemed like the natural next step. His apartment was stunning. Sleek, modern furnishings, clean layouts, and a balcony with an incredible view of the city skyline. He'd even set aside space for me to add personal touches to make it feel like our shared home. That's just how Jim is. Always thoughtful and planning ahead. We shared everything. Rent, utilities, groceries, all of it. And I was genuinely impressed by how well organized he was. However, during our discussion about living arrangements, one topic took me by surprise. His minimal hosting rule. No frequent hangouts or surprise visitors, just gatherings for special occasions. Special occasions? I repeated, nodding. At the time, it didn't seem like a big deal. I thought, sure, no wild parties, easy enough. Plus, Jim wasn't the outgoing party-loving type. He was more reserved, and I respected that about him. Still, part of me wondered, how much harm could a little fun cause every now and then? A few months in, my best friend Emily got engaged and came to visit. I was ecstatic for her. Emily had been my confidant for years, and I wanted to celebrate. Nothing extravagant, just a small get-together with a few close friends, catching up over wine and snacks. To me, this definitely qualified as a special occasion. I ran the plan by Jim. He didn't seem thrilled, but didn't outright oppose it either. After a brief pause, he asked, "How many people?" "4, including me," I answered quickly. "It's not a party, just a small gathering. Emily's engaged, Jim. It's a big deal." He hesitated as though weighing his options, but finally agreed. "All right, just keep it low-key." The evening went wonderfully. We laughed, reminisced, and toasted to Emily's engagement. It felt like a warm slice of home in this new chapter of my life. Jim stayed mostly in the bedroom, which I assumed was his way of giving us space. The next morning, though, something felt off. Jim seemed quieter than usual, not upset, just withdrawn. When I asked if he was okay, he shrugged and said, "Yeah, just tired." I chalked it up to his introverted nature. Social events could be draining for him. Besides, the gathering hadn't gotten out of control. No mess, no loud music, just a small group of friends enjoying themselves. Still, a nagging feeling lingered. Maybe he hadn't been as okay with it as I thought. But I reasoned he'd adjust. After all, I wasn't planning to host gatherings every weekend. That's the thing with Jim. He's not one to make a big fuss, which can make it hard to gauge how he truly feels. As for me, I've always been a social person. I thrive on that connection with friends. And honestly, I saw our home as a shared space, not just his. I thought that meant we'd find middle ground on things like this. Looking back, I probably underestimated how important that hosting rule was to him. At the time, though, bending it felt minor, even harmless. I mean, if you can't celebrate life's big moments with your closest friends, what's the point of sharing a home? So I moved on, convinced everything was fine. But sometimes the smallest ripples can grow into something far bigger. "Hey, Jim here." After a long week, all I wanted was to collapse on my couch, crack open a beer, and unwind. But the moment I opened the door, the sound of laughter and clinking glasses hit me like a wave. I froze. My apartment, my sanctuary, had turned into a full-on party. 6 women, all strangers to me, were sprawled across my furniture, chatting and laughing like they owned the place. And there, right in the middle, was Grace, looking completely at ease, wine glass in hand. She noticed me and waved, grinning. "Hey, babe," she called out cheerfully, as if inviting a crowd into our home without asking me was no big deal. But what really hit me was the coffee table. My heart sank as I saw them. 3 open bottles of my vintage wine. My prized collection, carefully curated over years, reserved for meaningful occasions, now uncorked and passed around like cheap store-bought wine. One of Grace's friends, a woman I didn't recognize, raised her glass toward me. "This is amazing! Can we open another bottle? It's so good," she said casually, as though I were some bartender catering to their whims. I froze, struggling to keep my composure. Every part of me was burning with frustration. I couldn't stay quiet any longer. I walked straight over to Grace, determined to stay calm, but it wasn't easy. I don't want to lose my temper, but I can't let this go. Grace, we need to talk. Now, I say, keeping my tone short and firm. She looks at me, a bit puzzled, but follows me into the kitchen without hesitation. As soon as the door closes, I let my frustration show. "What is going on here?" I ask, my irritation unmistakable. "That's my wine, Grace. Do you even understand how much those bottles are worth? Do you realize what you've just done? They weren't meant for something like this, not for some random get-together with people I don't even know. Did you even think to ask me first?" She raises her eyebrows, clearly surprised by the intensity of my reaction. "Jim, come on. It's just wine. You've got plenty of it. It's really not a big deal. Everyone's having a good time. Can't you just let them enjoy it?" Her dismissive attitude only fuels my frustration. "It's not just wine," I respond sharply. "Those bottles are valuable, Grace. They were meant for meaningful occasions, not passed around casually at some random hangout. You didn't ask me. You didn't stop to consider how I'd feel. You just let people help themselves." I step closer, my anger now fully visible. "What made you think this was okay without checking with me first? Those bottles weren't just for show. They were saved for special moments, not a Tuesday night with your friends." "And for what? To make them feel welcome?" Her irritation flickers across her face as she sighs, visibly annoyed. "Jim, seriously. Don't be so dramatic. I'll replace the wine, okay? It's not a big deal. They were just having fun. Why are you making this into such a huge issue?" She crosses her arms and looks away as though I'm the one being unreasonable. "Dramatic?" I snap, unable to hold back. "This is exactly the problem. You always brush things off, acting like they don't matter, and I'm supposed to just go along with it. You don't respect my space, my belongings, or me, and I'm done letting it slide." I take a deep breath, trying to keep my anger in check, but it's hard. "This isn't just about the wine, Grace. It's about you never considering how your actions affect me. You don't stop to ask because you don't care." Her expression softens slightly, but it feels more like impatience than true remorse. "Fine, I'm sorry," she says with a sigh. "I'll replace the wine. Can we just move on from this?" I pause, debating whether to say more. Finally, I let it go, for now. I know Jim's upset about the wine, but honestly, I think he's making way too big a deal out of it. It's just wine. I get that he worked hard to build that collection, but this is our home now, not some private wine museum. He can't treat every single thing like it's off limits. That night, after our argument, I tried to smooth things over. I promised to replace the bottles. But I've been through this before. He gets mad, we argue, and then it blows over. It's exhausting. I feel like I'm constantly walking on eggshells around him. All I wanted was to enjoy some time with my friends. Why is that so wrong? So the next weekend, I decided to host a small brunch. Jim's usually out running errands on Saturday mornings, so I figured he'd be gone for most of the day. I didn't think a casual get-together would be a problem. We should be able to have fun here too, right? But of course, Jim came back earlier than I expected. The moment I heard the door open, my stomach sank. His footsteps were deliberate, and I could tell right away he wasn't happy. I walked into the living room to greet him, but the tension was already thick. He stood in the doorway, taking in the scene. Laughter, mimosas, crumbs scattered across the couch. One of my friends had her feet up on the coffee table, and someone had cranked the sound system louder than Jim would ever allow. It was like a switch flipped. I could feel the mood shift instantly. He didn't say hello or even acknowledge anyone else. He just looked straight at me, his face tight. "Grace, a word," he said, his tone clipped and sharp. No hi or pleasantries, just that cold, businesslike tone that told me I was about to get scolded again. I rolled my eyes but followed him into the kitchen, preparing for another lecture. "We've talked about this," he said, his voice low but tense. "I shouldn't have to keep reminding you. And what's with my stuff? It's not theirs to use. It's not that complicated, Grace. I sighed, trying to downplay the situation. Jim, relax. These aren't strangers. They're my closest friends. They're practically family. But he wasn't buying it. His jaw clenched and his eyes burned with frustration. Practically family? He repeated, his tone dripping with sarcasm. This isn't about them, Grace. It's about you. You keep ignoring boundaries. You don't think about how your actions affect me, and this is the last time I'm bringing it up. My irritation flared. Of course I care, I snapped. But you're acting like I'm throwing wild parties every night. It's just brunch. Why is that such a big deal? I shook my head, frustrated. It's not like I'm intentionally disrespecting you. I'm just trying to create memories with my friends, to make this place feel like a home. Why does everything always have to go your way? I demanded. Jim didn't respond, just stared at me silently, and I knew it was time to back off. I tried to cool down, but the irritation kept bubbling up. Jim, it's not like I'm doing anything terrible. It's just brunch, a simple gathering. Why are you turning this into such a big issue? But deep down, I knew how this would play out. I'd apologize, he'd let it go, and we'd move on like always. That's how it had always been. I just wished he could loosen up and stop taking everything so seriously. Was that really too much to ask? I had planned something special for Grace's birthday, a quiet dinner at her favorite restaurant, just the two of us. It wasn't flashy or over the top, but it was thoughtful. I wanted to focus on her, give her my full attention, and share a peaceful evening together. I even called ahead to make sure her favorite dessert would be available. But the moment we walked into the restaurant, something felt off. Grace seemed unusually animated, almost glowing with excitement. At first I thought it was because she was happy about the evening I'd planned. Then I noticed a large table in the corner filled with her friends already laughing and drinking. My stomach sank. "Surprise," Grace said with a big smile. "I invited a few friends to join us. I thought it would be fun." I froze, staring at the group of 10 people waving at us. This wasn't the night I had arranged, and she knew it. "Grace," I said quietly, trying to stay calm, "we talked about this. Tonight was supposed to be just the two of us." She dismissed me with a casual wave of her hand. "Come on, Jim, it's my birthday. I wanted to celebrate with everyone. Don't be so uptight." A surge of anger rose in my chest. How could she disregard all the effort I'd put into planning this evening? I wanted something intimate and meaningful, just for us. Instead, she had unilaterally turned it into a group event without even consulting me. "I'm leaving," I said flatly. "Enjoy your party." The room fell silent as I grabbed my jacket. I could feel all eyes on me, but I didn't care. Grace called out after me, her voice a mix of annoyance and confusion, but I kept walking. I stepped out into the cool night air, which hit me like a slap. My frustration simmered beneath the surface, but oddly I also felt a sense of relief. This wasn't the first time Grace had made me feel like I didn't matter, but it was the first time I refused to go along with it. I'd had enough of her brushing off my feelings and making decisions without considering me. As I walked away from the restaurant, I realized I wasn't just leaving the dinner. I was walking away from the entire situation. Grace could have her party, her friends, and her way of doing things. I was done. This wasn't just about the birthday dinner. It was about respect, and Grace had made it clear she didn't have any for me. I tried calling after him, but he didn't even glance back. What kind of person does that? We'd been together long enough for him to understand how much my friends mean to me. I couldn't believe he was overreacting like this. I was furious, but watching him walk away made it worse. The anger surged in my chest. How could he leave me like that? The rest of the night was a blur. The celebration felt meaningless. I didn't have an appetite, and the mood was ruined. I turned to my friends, hoping for some support, but they all gave me looks that made me feel like I was the one at fault. "I don't know what his problem is," I said through clenched teeth. "It's my birthday. How hard is it to understand that I want to celebrate with the people I care about?" I could tell my friends were trying to be sympathetic, but I also saw doubt in their eyes. They didn't get it. None of them had been in a relationship like ours where I constantly felt like I was balancing his boundaries with my need for space, my friends, and his discomfort around them. But this was too much. "I'm staying with you tonight," I told Carol as I stormed out of the restaurant. "I need some space to think." I considered going back to the apartment, but I couldn't face him after what had happened. I needed distance. I needed time to cool off and figure things out before confronting him. The next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache and a heavy feeling in my chest. I wasn't ready to deal with Jim, but I knew I couldn't avoid him forever. The events of the previous night kept playing over and over in my head. What had I done wrong? Why couldn't he understand that spending time with my friends was important to me? Why did he always shut down whenever I tried to talk about it? When I finally returned to the apartment, the first thing I noticed was that all my belongings, my clothes, my personal items, were stacked outside the door in boxes. I froze, unable to process what I was seeing. Why was everything packed up like I was being kicked out? Then I spotted a note sitting on top of one of the boxes. My hands trembled as I picked it up and read the message. "Replace the 8 bottles of wine you promised and take your valuables. Everything else is already packed." My heart stopped. The wine. I had promised to replace it. Jim had made it clear how much he hated it when I touched his collection, but I hadn't thought it was such a big deal. Then I saw it, my jewelry, my laptop, my watch collection, all set aside as if they didn't matter. Everything else was packed away like it was just meaningless clutter to him. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about the wine at all. Jim was done. He was done with me, and he wanted me to know it. A wave of rage swept over me. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. All of this? Because I invited my friends to celebrate my birthday, I felt like I couldn't breathe. My anger boiled over, ready to erupt like a volcano. I started shouting, pacing around the apartment. "This is how you treat me?" I yelled, tears burning my eyes. "This is how you repay me for everything? You think you can just pack up my stuff and kick me out? You think I'm just going to walk away like this?" My voice broke as my emotions spilled out, a mix of hurt, confusion, and fury. It felt like my world had shattered in an instant. I was angry at him for leaving, angry at myself for not seeing this coming. I couldn't believe Jim would end things like this, without a fight, without giving me a chance to explain. It was over. I had pushed him too far, and yet part of me still couldn't understand why it had to end this way.